US President Donald Trump's first visit as president to the country, and he's of course spent the morning in Ahmedabad. Very disturbing visuals have come out of capital Delhi, specifically northeast Delhi, where reports emerged of clashes between pro and anti-CAA protesters. Delhi Police Head Constable Ratan Lal has been killed in the clashes that followed and the violence that followed. A DCP has been injured as well. There have been reports of large-scale violence, arson and destruction of property. While there have been several statements, including many asking for calm and peace to be restored, Section 144 had to be imposed in some areas. But it also raises larger questions over where the CAA protests now stand and the sort of clash between two sets of protesters. To get more perspective on this, I'm joined now by political activist and president of Swaraj India, Yogendra Yadav, who's been witness to some of these violent clashes today as well. Mr. Yadav, thank you for speaking with us on a day that is extremely disturbing for anyone seeing the pictures coming out of Delhi. From what you have seen and heard, how has this all begun and escalated so quickly?
Tamanna, as anyone know, I'm no fan of Mr. Modi or Mr. Trump. But as an Indian, we have head of another country visiting our country. This is the day to showcase India to the rest of the world. And these are not the images you want the country or anyone in the world to see today. So these are very disturbing images. What's happened is this. As you know, Delhi and many other parts of the country have witnessed anti-CAA protests. There are at least 10 places in Delhi where you have Shaheen Bagh-like sit-ins. In some of these places, just day before yesterday and yesterday, they called for a bandh. So some people came out, sat on streets. That was for a limited period of 24 hours. Police could have dispersed it. It could have been handled. But what happened was that one BJP leader comes there, gives them an ultimatum, incites almost violence against them. And this is what leads to escalation of situation. So what happened today is that this is just one part of Delhi, as you mentioned, northeast of Delhi. East of Delhi is generally very poor locality. Northeast is particularly poor with significant pockets of Muslims there. These are areas like Chandbagh, Kardampuri, Bhajanpura, Gokalpuri, Maujpur, Zafrabad. In these areas, when people were on the street in some of these places, police confronted them. It all began in Chandbagh with police lathi charging some of the women who were there on the street, which led to retaliation. In some other areas, it's not just police who came to confront these protesters. It actually became pro-CAA protesters, actually BJP supporters brought in to turn it into a confrontation between two political groups. And to be absolutely frank, it became a Hindu-Muslim confrontation in some of these areas, with police being almost either a mute spectator or actively supporting one of the groups. This is what has led to the chaotic situation that we witnessed in some parts of East Delhi. This has led, as you mentioned, to the death of one constable, very regrettable. We have been out on the street on behalf of our group, which has been supporting the anti-CAA protests. We said, in any case, we must de-escalate. So I personally visited the Jafrabad site. My friends have just been to Khoreji and other places. And we are trying desperately to de-escalate. In some places we have succeeded. But we really wish the police was also an active partner in de-escalating the situation.
Mr. Yadav, the sequence of events that you've described now, this is what has been happening very often in the recent past. A situation like this emerges. So we know for a fact that there have been clashes, there has been violence, but then there's one version saying a particular side started it. And then there will be a contrary version saying that it was in fact anti-CAA protesters who've turned violent. Then the question will arise that is it a time to relook at these anti-CAA protests, especially if they can turn violent? how does it become even possible to believe any one narrative? How do we really know what's going on? And in this case, can you really say that there was no violence or retaliation in a violent fashion from anti-CAA protesters?
Tamanna, as you know, I am part of the anti-CAA movement in the country.
Yes.
But any honest movement must be frank about what has happened. To my mind, there is no doubt about two things. Number one, that most of the violence began either with police brutality or with provocation from many of the BJP cadre. At the same time, there is no doubt about the fact that there was retaliation by anti-CAA protesters in several places. And in fact, that's why people like me have come out public in open. We have said that, look, those who are fans of God's sake can stoop to his level. But those who are in this movement, who invoke Gandhi, they have to rise to Gandhi's level. There is no place for retaliation. This has happened. This is regrettable, must be stopped. And we, as responsible people involved in the movement, are trying to do our very best to try and prevent it. I've personally been traveling to some of these conflict ridden areas. We were in the middle of places where tear gas shells were being lobbed, trying to persuade people to just open the roads. And through you, I would again appeal to all the protesters. Please lift all blockades of roads. Let's not do that. Let's not create occasions which would lead to this. Tomorrow we have a national guest in the national capital. Tomorrow is not the day to put out such a sorry figure of our country.
So this includes for, the protests at Shaheen Bagh, the sit-ins at Shaheen Bagh, which have been continuing for nearly 2 months. Do you think that those protests should also be withdrawn and those blockades lifted? And I reiterate the question I asked earlier. The pictures from today will do a great disservice to anti-CAA protests. If there was, and whatever public sympathy there was with the cause of people who wanted to go on, peaceful protests, evaporates when it comes down to violence.
You are right. These pictures are regrettable. These pictures would do disservice to India. They would do disservice to police. They would do disservice to the anti-CAA protesters. Of course, they should also do disservice to the ruling party of the country. Every one of us comes out in poor light in a situation like this. When I say opening the blockade, I do not mean those regular sit-ins. But what happened in the last 36 hours was that people moved out of the regular dharna and came out on the street and blocked some of the roads. And I'm making an appeal. Please lift all that. Go back to your original dharnas, most of which are not blocking the road, most of which are on the side lanes and sides of the road. Does it put anti-CAA movement on the back foot? To my mind, it does call for reflection. And if this movement takes a violent turn, it cannot claim to be a movement to defend the Constitution. So the onus is on us as well, as much as it is on Delhi police, as much as it is on the ruling party. The onus is certainly on us as well. And we, the people of India, this large coalition of anti-CAA protesters, has gone out of its way. And through you, I would reiterate, please let us not give any provocation, no retaliation, no matter what the provocation, there should be no retaliation.
Given the current situation, and as I mentioned, sympathies will drop seeing the violent pictures today. Do you think it's time to hit the pause button on anti-CAA protests, at least for now, considering that there is a team of interlocutors, put in place by the Supreme Court who are trying to find a way out?
I think, Tamanna, it's only fair to say that pictures and visuals of today put everyone in a poor light, not just anti-CAA protesters, as you would have noticed, and I'm sure you would have reported. Much of that begins with Delhi police. Much of that is instigated by the ruling party goons, with Delhi police watching. So I don't think sympathies should shift only one way, unless the reporting is completely biased. As for pause button, I think the movement has gone into second phase anyway. And people like me have been saying that the time for big mobilizations is over. we should focus on communication. We should not focus so much on street protest. To my mind, blocking of streets and roads is not justified. The focus should now shift on communication. And would it not be better, Tamanna, if the government were also to respond to this? Why should we depend on the Supreme Court to talk to protesters? I thought in democracy, the elementary norm was that the government spoke to protesters about what their issue was. Unfortunately, for the last more than 2 months now, there has not been any response. So, to my mind, I would hope for a government response.
Yes.
But even if there is none, I would want the protests to go into communication mode now, a quieter communication mode, leading to a boycott of the NPR that begins on the 1st of April.
Well, let's hope that peace is restored in the capital, and let's remember, in the middle of all of this, the role of authorities to maintain law and order is absolute and should be the first focus point. Thank you, Mr. Yadav, for speaking with us on the show today.
Thank you.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of the India Development Debate. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll tell you what finally came out of the Trump visit, and of course, all the top market, business, current affairs, political stories, basically everything you need to know right on this show. I'll see you back here tomorrow.